If you've made it this far, congratulations. My name's Miss Slater, and this presentation aims to give you some tips for the two writing tasks from my experience as a GAT assessor. For writing tasks number 1 and 2, I'll do the following in this presentation. I'll explain the purpose of the task or what it's asking you to do. It's good to reiterate that. I'll briefly expand on what the criteria means and drill down a little bit more into that. I'll give you some suggestions on how to plan and approach each task. And finally, I'll give you some tips on the structure and written features of each task from an assessor's point of view. You will get more out of this presentation if you have the 2019 GAT paper open, as my examples refer specifically to last year's writing tasks. Open up to writing task number 1 in the 2019 GAT paper. You can see it is a double-page spread of written and graphical information presented in colour, and there's quite a lot there. Your task is to demonstrate understanding of the main topic illustrated in this information. What is it about? You then need to make connections between the material and present your understanding in a written piece. The form of your written piece is informative. Think of it like a report. Do not present an argument or opinion on this material. Save your persuasive writing for task number 2. Let's look at that criteria a little more closely. The first criteria is how well you organise and present your understanding of the material. And what it's really looking for is the skills of synthesising the material or grouping it together and making connections between the material, and then informing and explaining these connections of this material to your audience. Criteria number 2 is how effectively you communicate the information. Well, this is simply the structure or form. It needs to be in an introduction, some clear body paragraphs, and a conclusion. The third criteria is how clearly you express yourself, and this is the quality of your writing. It's things like your sentence structure. Is it nice and clear and concise? Do you use linking words to connect your ideas within your piece? What word choices have you made? And the voice of your piece. Now, the marking style is holistic marking, meaning that the overall quality of the piece is evaluated. That means it doesn't have to be perfect. Let's move on to how to approach and plan for writing task number 1. And this is critical if your piece of writing is to be of quality. This task is asking you to inform the audience about the main topic presented in the material and explain it to them. For example, in the 2019 exam, the main topic is about the planet Mars. That's fairly obvious. In order to explain and inform your audience about Mars, you need to demonstrate that you can synthesize the information, that is, make connections between it and group it together, not just repeat it. Make sure you read the information carefully. It is quite easy to make errors in your writing when you have a lot of information to deal with. And this does not demonstrate understanding of the material, which is one of the criteria. So take your time in reading this information. I think the next point on the slide is very important, and that is to number each piece of information and make some notes about anything that strikes you as interesting. For example, in the 2019 exam, Piece 2 informs about the work of Abigail Orwood, who is an Australian geologist and astrobiologist. You could also make connections between pieces 1, 8 and 10, as they all inform about how Mars has featured in human history. And then in your writing, you could group these together. Although 30 minutes is recommended, you may require 35 minutes on writing task number 1 because, as I've said, there's a lot of material to deal with. And therefore, you could cut your persuasive piece down, which is a more familiar style of writing to you, down to 25 minutes. So don't worry if you spend a little bit of extra time on this one. Now let's move on to some tips about structure and writing for task number 1. Your opening and closing should outline what the topic is and then again at the end return to that topic. So referring back to the 2019 GAT paper, the topic is obviously about the planet Mars. But don't start with something really pedestrian like the topic is about or the article talks about Mars. Try to grab the reader's attention. Instead, you could say something like, although humans have inhabited planet Earth for millions of years, there has always been a longing for exploration of outer space. In particular, that mysterious planet Mars has captured the imagination of humans and been immortalized in fiction. This is much more interesting. You should have some body paragraphs which present the information that has been grouped together and shows the links between them. Start each body paragraph with a sentence summing up what the paragraph is about. For example, Mars has been regarded as a figure of mystery in the universe throughout human history. This groups and synthesizes the information in pieces 1, 8, and 10. Make sure you are accurate with the information. For example, who people are and what their role is. Abigail Allwood, who is mentioned in piece 2, is an Australian geologist and astrobiologist. She did not put together this information, as some students said last year. Pick up on a reoccurring theme in the pieces of information and draw upon this in your writing, particularly in the opening and closing. For example, that phrase, mysterious Mars, from piece 1. You can also quote from the information, such as, authors have long been fascinated by mysterious Mars, the alluring red planet, from piece 1, or a planet that evokes curiosity and wonder, from piece 5. Use some descriptive and interesting language in your writing to explain the topic. For example, mankind has continued to develop more and more advanced technological and scientific methods to investigate this mysterious planet, and note how it has a quote embedded within it. Creative forms such as interviews or short stories can really get lost in the writing and just not cover enough of the information to score well. So be really cautious about using these forms. Think of it, as I said previously, more like a report. And remember, this is not about your opinion of the topic. Save that for writing task number 2. Let's move on to look at writing task number 2, the point of view. You should be more familiar with this type of writing task and feel more confident in your writing ability. If you open the 2019 GAT paper to this task, you will see you are presented with statements on a single issue. Your task is to write a point of view on the overall issue as presented in one or more of these statements. Unlike writing task number 1, you are free to draw upon your knowledge or information you may have to support your point of view. Moving on to look at the criteria. The first criteria is the extent to which you develop your point of view in a reasonable and convincing way. And the key words here are reasonable and convincing. Your point of view must be believable. It must be credible. So don't sort of create some far-fetched point of view or contention that's just not believable. And the second criteria is how effectively you express yourself. So once again, this is about your writing style and the quality of your writing. So you must have some structure to the overall piece, which I'll talk about on the next slide. But your sentences should be clear and crisp and concise and linked well between them. And think really carefully about your word choices for this writing task. It is a persuasive piece, and I'll talk more about the type of language that you should use in this piece a little bit further on. When planning for writing task number 2, I think it's really important to number each of the statements about the overarching issue as you read them, just like you did for writing task number 1. I also think you should make some quick short notes in which you 1, rephrase the statements in your own words to ensure you really understand the prompt. For example, ideas from the past are still relevant today is statement number 1 in the 2019 GAT paper, rephrased. 2, I think you should identify any links between the statements. For example, in the 2019 paper, statements 2 and 3 are of opposing ideas. And number 3, choose which statement you will use as the basis for your argument, and perhaps choose another statement as the basis for your rebuttal statement. Now, that brings us to the structure of this writing task. It should consist of an introductory paragraph, 2 to 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. You must, within this structure, include a clear contention on the issue and a rebuttal. This is the basis of any good point of view writing. So your opening should state a clear contention and outline the arguments to be addressed in your writing piece. Say something about the statement you are basing your contention on. For example, progress is a vital concept that has powered the development of human civilization since its genesis. This concept of progress, however, can only be made through the creation of new ideas, and it goes on. Now, this example used statement 3 as a basis for the contention, but it said something else about it. You must also include a rebuttal. For example, while we exercise common sense to these ideas, if people are frozen by fear of failure, how can we move forward? And this example rebuts statement 2 from the 2019 paper. Let's continue on with looking at how to structure your piece of writing. So you have an introduction, you've stated your contention and outlined your main ideas, and of course you must include a rebuttal. In your body paragraphs, you should explain your arguments, and to do this you can use examples from your general knowledge, from other subjects you have studied, from your reading and viewing, your own life, and even well-known people. The issue chosen for the GAT paper is quite general and broad, rather than being very specialised and narrow in focus, which means you are able to draw on a wide resources and knowledge in order to further your argument. You must have a conclusion in order for your piece to be finished. So if you are running out of time, please try to add at least a 2-sentence conclusion. If you have a little more time, your closing should repeat your contention and sum up your ideas succinctly, as in this example. Innovation, overcoming fear, and new ideas aren't simple. Another title to a self-help book. They are tools for human change. Without such tools and without dedication to change, moving forward would be impossible. Finally, let's look at some tips regarding your writing for this task, and this links back to the second criteria of how well you express your ideas. You must try to use some persuasive language and techniques, and these are just some examples. A rhetorical question. An example from last year's GAT paper, what is the point of a new idea if it is not accepted? Some language that intensifies your argument and creates some imagery for the audience. It can be single words such as bulletproof, trailblazers, or phrases such as imagine a world, or the key to success, spark a new idea. You can directly address your audience to include them and make them feel that the issue matters to them by using that second person pronoun you. Remember that time you? And also, and lastly, repetition. New ideas, new products, new food, new movies. Repetition along with some listing is very persuasive. Well, if you've made it through to the last slide of my presentation, congratulations. And finally, I wish you good luck for the 2020 GAT.